This is the Kitchen Sink WP Podcast, episode 283.
I program my home computer.
We have a server crash. 404 error. Page not found. Links aren't working. System is crashing. System is crashing. System is crashing.
Your old HTML website. Barely alive. We have the technology. We have WordPress. A new website. Better than it was before. Better. Stronger.
Faster. We have the technology.
Why, hello everybody. This is Adam Silver, the host of the Kitchen Sink WP Podcast. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. All right, upcoming events. There are no WordCamps next weekend. That's kind of sad. So my recommendation always, of course, would be to watch WordCamp talks that you might have missed over at WordPress.tv. So check those out. Also, but another upcoming event that is happening in September, I believe, it's going to be my class, WordPress Essentials course. You can go over to wpe.kitchensinkwp.com for info. There's a little button to say you're interested, and as soon as I set that up, probably in the next week or so, I'm going to pick the dates and have that ready to go. I might be doing it this time via Zoom, possibly, because that way I can actually have it more of a classroom feel. People can be there on camera if they want and ask questions during that I can see and hear versus just read in a chat room. I was using another webinar software. We'll see if that goes well, if I can figure out how to connect the dots that way for payments, etc. Anyway, so WordPress Essentials coming up in September. Head over to wpe.kitchensinkwp.com for that. All right, moving on. Segment 1 in the news. A couple things here. WordCamp Asia has been set for February 21st through 23rd in 2020. It's in Bangkok, Thailand. It's the first regional WordCamp for the continent. Which is pretty cool. 127 WordPress meetups, chapters with 73,000 members across 23 countries. That's pretty cool stats there. So I was just actually telling my wife that I think I may try to go. It is the same weekend as my son's birthday and my dad's birthday. So Carson will be 20, he'll be 15. Oh my gosh. So maybe I'll just take him with me. That'll be a nice trip for him. Anyway, okay, so check that out. WordCamp Asia set for February 2020. Also in the news, Yoast SEO had a blog post, which was shared with me by my friend Stephen Harvey. The blog post was, "Are podcasts the new blogs?" Sure, I like to think so. And how Yoast can help with podcasting as far as the content goes. Check it out, link in the show notes. Nice blog post there. Also, a blog post I found I wanted to share was over at cPanel that the death of SquirrelMail is happening. SquirrelMail is an super old email front end, I suppose. I've used it since college. I've used that. SquirrelMail. I used to use Pine Mail, other ones, just some super old ones. But cPanel will no longer support it in WHM version 78. They've removed SquirrelMail entirely. So that was actually I don't know why that came up recently, but I guess this post was done from April 19th, 2018. Maybe I missed it. Apparently I did, but there you have it. Okay. And that's it in the news. Is that it? Yeah, that's it in the news. Okay. Moving on, segment 2, the meat and potatoes. Well, recently I was listening to a few podcasts, as I do during my walks and runs during the day. Got me thinking about running my old little company, my agency over at Concierge WP. And with the recent departure of one person and the adding of 2 new people, as well as a previous contractor coming back into the mix possibly, well, that and my overall processes of what I do day to day and how I run the business had me starting to consider and thinking about my identity. So it turns out that we all have multiple identities. Not like we're not multiple personalities per se, but multiple identities. And in mulling this over and this thought process out, I asked a few friends in the industry that I'm a part of, in the ecosystem of WordPress, and also just other business owners as well. And those conversations went much deeper than I expected, almost to a deep philosophical level. But when it comes to running a company of any size, there's an issue here of identity and leadership and how they overlap. So let's take a moment first and foremost with identity. If you recall Mr. Rogers, if you're here from the States, I think actually he was pretty international. Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, he would open each show by entering his home, right? Changing out his shoes for sneakers, his like black dress shoes, work shoes we'll call them, then put on a cardigan sweater, all while singing a song. And I think he did that to set the stage of he's in a certain place in a mindset. He's switching from one identity outside of the home into a new identity inside the home. And I use that reference for a few reasons. One being, this time last year, there was a documentary about Fred Rogers. I saw that when I was actually traveling overseas. And most recently, there's a trailer that came out recently with Tom Hanks, a new movie coming out about Mr. Rogers as well. And it clearly shows he has two identities, outside the home and inside the home. Okay, so that said, I then asked my good friend Greg from ServerPress about his identity and if it was any different with his interactions with his coworkers and founders and partners, because they all overlap there, during his workday versus when he's not working with them, just talking to them. And that conversation went much differently than expected. And Greg takes great pride in this. And he said that, in his opinion, we are all different in identities with each person that we interact with, from our wives and spouses and partners, our kids, our friends, our clients. And there are with many degrees within that as well, which I thought was really fascinating, because based on certain comfort levels, you may talk to a client or a friend in a certain way based on how comfortable you are with that person, how much you want to reveal about yourself. In Greg's case, his words that he's an introvert. If he was going to a conference, he would be on the wallflower, whereas I'm more of an extrovert. I like to be in the mix, in the middle of things. But Greg and I can talk at length for hours at a time, or do a Zoom call, or talk about technology, or about anything really, because we are good friends, and we've traveled together and whatnot. So something to think about as well. So you have multiple identities with everyone you interact with, but also different levels and different degrees of that identity as well, which I thought was interesting. So as a leader of my own agency, with people working for me, I expect certain things. But when I step out of my home office into the house, let's say, because I have a home office here, so I step out into the hallway, and if I see the living room or the kitchen looking like a disaster, in my mind, I'm still the boss, and I speak to my teenage kids in that boss mode versus dad mode. They don't see me as the boss, per se, but if I talk to them about cleaning things up, and I don't get the same reaction from them as I might expect from, let's say, an employee or a contractor because I'm paying them, well, it's not a good place for me to be, because then things can spiral out of control from the control aspect, if you will, if you know what I mean, as a leader, okay? And so the reason I bring this up is, as leaders, we need to know how and when the identity we are portraying at that moment is working for us or against us, and then shift accordingly. So if I walk out of my home office, I should then shift back into dad mode or partner mode, not stay as a quote-unquote owner and leader, business owner mode, okay? So now, taking a moment with leadership, as I do strongly believe these two items are intertwined, I'm fairly confident that in my belief that at times I'm holding my team back, the team back, not just my team, but everyone. In a way, I need to figure this out and get out of the way. I need to really just breathe, assign the tasks, but let people run with things and trust that it's going to get done. Because if I want to touch everything and if I have that control element, things won't get done. I'm holding the team back as a leader. Part of that, though, is also setting guidelines and processes and goals, and then defining all those terms, and even defining what, let's say, winning looks like. I need to tell the team, hey, I want to grow Concierge WP by X factor or X client base in this next 6 months. We need to know as a team what things are to be, okay? And most recently, I implemented the process so of when I bring on a trusted new partner, that they'll get a company email address. They're added to Slack as well as to the Asana account. And if there's pushback from that person, well, maybe they're not a good fit after all, because I really want, to be blunt here, I want to have a cohesive appearance to the clients. I want the agency to be, we're all on the same page, versus having me, I don't know, have to copy and paste an email from a developer back to the client. I just want it to be, we're all a team here. The client, it doesn't matter what level of employee you are, W-2 versus 1099, I'm looking to have an entire consistency to what I'm trying to portray. That's the identity I'm trying to push to the clients. So that said, if you don't want to have a concierge email, well, maybe you aren't in the right place after all. So to wrap things up here and to give you a takeaway, take a moment, consider your identity when you're working with your clients, your family, your friends, your partners, and then lead by getting out of the way, but set clear expectations with clear consequences. So that is really the key here, because if you aren't clear with yourself and your identity at that moment and your expectations with consequences, then you're going to have a lot more confusion than I think you want to have in your day-to-day running of a small business. So I hope that helps for you. I think it's actually helping me a lot. And the more I think about this, the more I really want to just let this sink in for a bit and practice this and practice what I'm preaching. And I'm trying to do a much better job with this, especially when I walk out of the home office. That's really where my frustration sometimes lies. So, okay. Moving on, segment 3, tip and tool of the week. I wanted to mention, this was cool. Over at CodePen.io, somebody, I guess Knowability, I'm not sure if that's the person. They did some code, HTML, CSS, JS, animated labels with jQuery. So you can have, like in a form, if you click in the field, you have to go there and see it. I'll put a link in the show notes. The name part, username and password that are in the field, they animate to above the field in question. Kind of cool. So check that out. Kind of a neat little tip and tool of the week. Well, that is it this week. If you have any questions, go ahead and send it in via email, adam@KitchensinkWP.com, or use the speak pipe function of the website. If you want to support the show, you can do that by becoming a Patreon, KitchensinkWP.com/Patreon, Patreon. You can sponsor the show. There's a form on the website. Thank you so much for listening. Now go out and do some awesome things with WordPress. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.